New Heights. My name is Michael Hicks. And before I introduce my wonderful guests from around the other side of the world, here's a few words from our sponsors. Can't sleep, got the aches and pains. You all got to check out the CBD oil. It is Amish tested. It's proven formula, and not only does it relieve your aches and pain, but allows you to get some good quality sleep. So if you want any more information on this, or really just attempt to use the product, you can go to envitamins.com and use promo code New Heights. That's all capitalized, New Heights, and you get 50% off. So stop being not able to sleep. Stop being able to have the aches and pains. This is a great product. You got to check it out. I've used it. I swear by it. And the next sponsor, it is my own business, my Live to Thrive agency, where I help you become the best version of yourself through your mindset, through your purpose, uncovering your walk in life. Maybe it's career, maybe it's relationship, wherever it might be. I've got the proven formula that'll help you uncover the areas that you are really struggling in. All you got to do to go and check out and apply, you can go to Live to Thrive. That's LIV2thrive.com. You can apply to get on a journey call. That is absolutely free. Let's kind of uncover some things and see what we can do. All right. As we get into today's podcast, I'm super excited. I'm not going to talk about the topic yet, but I want to introduce my guests all the way from around the world. This is Shamala Tan. She is a therapeutic coach. She's an intuitive healer and an author specializing in emotional mastery, which we're going to uncover tonight, which I'm super excited about. And she's helping people break free from toxic relationship patterns. Sounds like what I do as well. I love it. And with over 20 years of experience, she guides clients to reclaim their inner power through practical tools, deep inner work, and spiritual insight. Shamala's work is grounded, transformational, and rooted in helping others heal from the inside out. Everybody, please welcome the one and only Shamala Tan. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Yes,
Wonderful.
I'm excited that you're here. Tell everybody where you are chiming in from.
Okay, I'm from Singapore, and if you don't know where Singapore is, it is in Southeast Asia. It is not in China, just so you know. It's not part of China. Singapore is independent. It's an island state, and yeah, that's where I'm coming from. Yeah.
It's wonderful. And I've had the opportunity to my listeners out there. I was a guest on her podcast with Alina as well. They give us a shout out on your podcast title really quick.
Yeah. So Alina is from Australia, and we have a podcast for midlifers, and it's called Empowered at Midlife. And go check it out. If you are a midlifer 40 and above, we share tips on how you can better your life. These conversations are important to have, especially if they are not readily available for you. And yeah, go check it out.
Yeah, it's a great podcast, and just want to let you guys know, all of my listeners out there, great topics of conversation. They've got a few awesome guests too. I've been catching your clips, so I love it. So hey, I want to talk today. We're going to talk about. So I was like, Shamala, like, thank you first of all for being on the show today. And I know we had like a date set, and then I had something come up, and then you had something come up, but we're here, and I'm excited about it. Thank you for being here. But today's topic, y'all, we're going to talk about mastering our emotions and kind of
Mm-hmm.
elevating your life and the power of what you and I would say kind of emotional IQ or emotional mastery. So I want to kind of start with a stat drop, and studies show that people. This is I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, Shamala. Studies show that people with high emotional intelligence earn an average of $29,000 more a year than those with low EQ.
Hmm.
Isn't that a
Okay.
crazy, alarming statistic?
It is interesting. But, well, when we look at statistics, it's hard to know what they mean by high EQ because EQ can mean many things. Because we have extremely manipulative people who may be considered high EQ because they know how to manipulate a person's feelings, get their way, right? So in sales is an important way, right, to sell your craft, to sell your services. You must know how to use the right words. That can be considered EQ, but at the same time, it may not be used for good.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know and so people who may seemingly have a lower EQ, but they tend to be very direct in how they speak, and it can be offensive to some people, right? People get offended, like, oh, why do you say that? And so they may not come across as super friendly, but these people with who are very direct are usually much more honest. So it's really difficult to gauge whether a person, when you have consider a high EQ, it may not necessarily mean that you are emotionally healthy or that you have mastered your own emotions. Yeah.
Ooh, that's a really good point. I want to say this. What are your thoughts on this? 90% of top performers usually have emotional intelligence. This was a statistic that I found from Talent Smart. What are your thoughts on that? It's interesting how you had just said that those individuals still don't know how to master their emotions, which I think is in a complete different um,
Mm.
kind of conversation. But what are your thoughts on that piece?
um 90%, what is it again? 90%
Yeah, so
of
they said
people.
they said that 90% of top performers have what is
Mm,
called high emotional EQ
mm,
or high
yeah,
high emotional intelligence, they said.
yeah, yeah. I think my response will be the same as what I said earlier on,
Yeah.
because you can be very high functioning and know the right thing to say, know how to connect with people. I mean, look here, narcissists are, they are very good in communicating, right? And they're good at selling themselves. And so people buy into them. On first look, they look like, oh, wow, very charming. They have very high EQ. But in the relationship long enough with them, you realize that, oh my God, this is extremely toxic. It's just manipulation at play. So, you know, 90% of high performance, I don't know how many out of that 90% are really, really in tune with their own emotions.
Yeah. Yeah,
We
that's
can
a
be very aware of other people's emotions and how to use it to our advantage, but whether they are aware of their own emotions is a totally different story as well.
what's interesting is Shamala, you talked about narcissistic, and we can just say narcissistic behavior. And I've encountered that a lot through my coaching and just seeing outside entities and people and all of this stuff. But what I think what's really interesting is how you have parents that are narcissistic, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then they push down that same trait to
Mm-hmm.
their children, and
Yeah.
then you start seeing the same behavior. You know,
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? Like how,
Yeah.
like, have you witnessed or seen any of this? And in
Oh,
your
yeah.
coaching, yeah, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. I think narcissism is be okay. Usually, it comes from deep trauma. Like a person has experienced very deep trauma, did not get the help they need at a young age, and then so they develop this narcissistic quality. And if they don't work on healing themselves or clearing it or seeking help, they have kids and they pass on the same behavior because the kids don't know better. For the kids, they'll think that, okay, this is what mom or dad is doing,
Yeah.
then it should be right, right?
Right.
So
Yep.
kids adopt the same behavior. But if among the kids you have one or two who are much more sensitive and very empathetic, they will feel the drain. They start to realize that there is something odd about the parent or maybe another sibling in the family who's behaving exactly like the parent. So then the extremely empathetic one becomes the scapegoat
Hmm.
or the one that has to supply them, you know, with feel good energies, for the narcissistic people in the family, and carrying the weight So this is extremely common
Yeah.
in families, and it's very hard to break the cycle unless you are aware that this is what you're doing. And once you get out of it, it's also important to watch for those traits that you may have unknowingly adopted, because you can be empathetic and at the same time have some of these narcissistic traits in you because of the environment that you grew up in. So when I often tell my clients this, because a lot of my clients are they grew up in narcissistic environment, so I help them in their, in healing and empowering themselves. And while they may be very empathetic, I also say watch out for some of the traits that you have unknowingly adopted as a survival mechanism,
Oh,
only because that's the only thing that you knew how, because that's what you learn by watching, your parents and or other people doing it. And so that self-awareness is the key. Once they're aware that, oh my god, I'm doing what my parent did, and so it's about rewiring, relearning how to respond to situations and
that's
not
a
repeat the cycle.
yeah. Let me ask you this question because I've got a few clients that I have that are divorcees, right?
Mm,
And they left a marriage in
mhm.
which the individual was an abuser, right? Emotionally, mentally, maybe not necessarily physically, but maybe
Yeah,
physically by punching stuff and things of that nature. And then they inherit kids together, right? And they were
yeah,
together for a long period of time. And then the one parent that is getting out of that relation, that got out of that relationship now, is still coping from the toxicity that happened in that current relationship, right? So then the kids go back and forth, but then you have the one parent, right, that left that abusive relationship, that's continued to work on themselves and found out that that person is maybe is a narcissistic or behavior, or etc. Like how do you combat that? Like how do you tell the other opposing parent now that has the kids 50% of the time, that hey, you just left an abusive relationship, but yet that person hasn't changed, they're still using that same narcissistic behavior on their kids, and now it's coming out in other areas in their life. Does that make
yeah.
sense?
Yes, absolutely. It makes sense. Um, you know what? I mean, when a person leaves a narcissistic relationship and you have kids, you do what you can to manage the situation. My suggestion is always to send your kids for therapy, so that you are kind of giving someone else the responsibility to care for them emotionally, because while you have left the relationship, you are still recovering. There is no way you can be a strong force emotionally for your kids, so the kids need therapy. And with therapy, it has to be a long term kind of goal, a long term plan for the kids, because the kids are going to see the other parent constantly. And you have to just hope and pray that when the kid reaches 18, 19, 20, they will have a realization of what is actually going on in the family dynamics, who is the one. Because chances are the narcissistic parent is going to make the other parent look like the bad guy. And the other parent is, the one who left, right? The one who was abused, not obvious abuse, but
Yeah, yeah,
abused
yeah,
nonetheless, will look like the bad guy, will
for
look like
sure.
the bad parent, because of you know what they stand up for. And so sending kids for therapy is a way where you are allowing your kids to grow and to flourish emotionally, and to give them a space where they are able to identify and able to see exactly what is going on. And by the time they are 18, 19, or 20, they have a realization, and hopefully they have a realization. Then they can make better choices, and then they can decide for themselves, what is it that I want? I see this, but do I want to emulate the behavior, or you know who is the one that who is standing by me, all this time, and who is the parent that I can lean on without being manipulated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just so sad though that, you know, you live in a society in which, I always watch these influencers, and I think I'm an influencer myself, and it always says, be aware of who your circle of trust is, right? Your circle of trust should always be challenging you and questioning, or maybe building you up or pushing you to be your best. And these individuals that you just mentioned, they are in a circle where they're like the top dog, and they're like in a comfortable circle where nothing gets challenged. And it's sometimes so baffling to me, Shamala, how parents can have a narcissistic behavior and push these things onto their kids, and the kids then start acting out, and then that parent taking no accountability of, hey, this is my fault. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's baffling to me. What are your thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
Well, I think narcissistic people have no idea they are narcissistic.
Yes, yes, yes.
So that's the big problem. There is a lack of self-awareness that this is what they're actually doing, and they truly believe, that they're doing the right thing while hurting people, along the way. They had no idea that this is what they had done. And so this is the problem, right?
Yes.
When a narcissistic person has no idea that this is what they're doing, then it causes so much harm. And inevitably the people around them go for therapy, but they are the ones who need therapy the most are not going for therapy
Right,
because you know
right. It's the ones that want to be better that are going for therapy. It's like, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Have you ever heard of the term called the Stockholm syndrome? Have you ever heard that
Oh
term
yeah.
before?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
it's like
Oh yeah.
so the the parent that was being abused, right, has had
Yeah.
this mechanism, or it's like a captive or abusive situation, like almost like positive towards like feelings. Oh, they're gonna do good. They're gonna do good. They're gonna do good. But they never do.
Yeah.
The narcissistic parent, keeps falling all the time,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then starts to point blame on other people. Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Because when you are in that situation, and usually the victim, in inverted commas, right, are very empathetic people. They are
Yeah,
givers. And so they tend to give people the benefit of the doubt. And they do that constantly with a narcissistic partner. Because don't forget, I mean, the narcissist will have good days, right? The narcissist will have good days where they will treat, the partner really well. And then things seem to be going very well. And so the empathetic one will start thinking that, oh, this is very hopeful. He or she is changing. And so they get trapped in this cycle because there will be days where they are good and then they stay because they are hopeful.
yeah,
And then it turns, right?
yeah,
And then they go into this, like, oh my God, the turbulence again. And it can, the cycle can last for decades
yeah. And
because the
what do you
empathetic one keeps giving chances.
what do you say to maybe someone that's listening to this podcast today? Is like, how many chances do you give a person like that? Because they obviously are struggling with emotional IQ, like to some degree, right? They still are very charismatic, and like you had said. But what do you say to individuals like that? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think people in narcissistic relationships struggle a lot because the struggle is real. I mean, there is love involved. And when you're given, you're dangled this carrot in front of you and you love the person and then you get very hopeful, um, is it's very hard. I mean, logically they know that, okay, this is abuse, I should not be staying here. This guy is not treating me well, or
Yeah,
this woman is not treating me well. But emotionally they are trapped and they're stuck. Basically also the nervous system is looking for some form of like a familiar fuse, to connect with. It feels safer. And so they need to rewire, firstly self-awareness, right?
yeah.
And
That's first.
then
Yeah,
to rewire the nervous system, to reboot how you are responding emotionally. And also usually these empathetic people in narcissistic relationships, they have been, they probably grew up in an environment where they have a narcissistic parent as well, so the patterns are repeated, or they are you know, in grew up in an environment where they have not been, or the parents are not very readily available emotionally, and so they see someone, a narcissistic person, as a wow, so charming, this person is giving me all the attention, right? And so they fall for it. I mean, this is
Yeah.
just it happens, right? And it happens more often than we realize.
And it's you had mentioned a big key word, awareness, and I want to kind of trigger. I want to kind of go into that, and I want to kind of set up a situation here. Think about for this is for our listeners. Think about the last time maybe you snapped at someone or avoided like a simple tough conversation. Was it really them, or was it your emotional state dictating that moment? Think about this to all of our listeners out there. And Shamala, I want you to key in because you mentioned a big word, awareness. But I want to say emotions really, everyone that's listening, they're not our enemy. They're basically messengers. And when we don't master them, they master us, right? So that brings me in perfectly in the segue of I think there's some keys to emotional mastery. And that's one, which you mentioned, awareness, right? How do you tell your clients, okay, you need, I always come with almost say self audit, but let's use the word awareness. What do you tell your clients in that situation? Like, what do you say to them?
Okay. Well, it really depends on how much work they have already done on themselves. There isn't a hard and fast rule, because if they're completely new to emotional awareness, then of course they're going to be very overwhelmed. They're not going to be able to develop that awareness so quickly. It takes practice. We
Yeah.
all think that emotions are very natural, but no, most people walk around very suppressed. They're numb or they're frozen,
Oh,
they have no idea what they're actually feeling. And so, if they are at the beginning of the journey of becoming more emotionally aware, chances are they'll be snapping more often, because everything is just coming up.
yeah.
And I tell them it's okay. This is just you expressing yourself, and sometimes it can be very overwhelming, and you don't know how to manage it. Don't be so hard on yourself. If it happens, it happens, right? Apologize to the other party and know that this is what you have done and what can you learn from it. Now, for someone who is on the journey for far longer, for example, and they have, uh, you know, the, they know how to regulate their emotions, and maybe they have been on a path long enough, and sometimes something happened and they snap, right? And so usually, I would tell the client, let's investigate this, because this must be something so deeply buried within you
Mhm.
that you did not realize it. And that when it happened and you snapped, it must be, the bigger the response, the deeper the trauma.
Oh,
That's
amen.
what I usually tell my clients, right? And so if you have a really big response, let's look at that. Like, what is really happening? How deep is that trauma? How buried is the trauma? And it can be
Yeah.
so buried that sometimes we don't have any memory of it.
Yeah, that's interesting that you said that. And I think a good way to like journaling is a big piece of a lot of my programming, and I'm sure it is with yours as well. I always tell my clients that I'm working with, like, what emotion did I feel was the strongest today? And then
Mhm.
what actually triggered that? Because here's the thing, you cannot literally master what you don't even recognize. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like, I think
yeah.
that's a really big piece. Um, what about your thoughts on regulation? And
Mm.
here's what I mean. Like, name it or tame it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
become like kind of use that method and like and label like an emotion that can actually reduce its intensity. Like, there's I use a lot of breathing techniques for my clients, and one breathing technique that's would be really helpful in this situation is a 4-4-4, like the four fours, right? Where you
Yeah.
inhale, hold, exhale, hold for a four count. What are your thoughts
Yeah.
on regulation, or what would you say?
Oh, regulation is the thing that I make my clients do. Emotional reg. I mean, we were not taught how to regulate our emotions, right? Even as children.
Yes.
And so the box breathing, right? The 4-4-4 box breathing is a really good tool. Another one that I do with my clients is grounding. That's also very important. And when you know, we expect people to know how to regulate their emotions, but how are they going to know how to do it if they haven't been taught how to do it?
That's a
And
good
so if
point.
we grow up in an environment where, let's say, your parent makes you stand in a corner, let's say you've done something right really
Yeah.
naughty
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and you've been taught to stand in a corner, that's actually a very good technique. When you tell the child, okay, stand in a corner, just sit there or stand there, face the wall, you are actually telling the child that you can stay and stand there and feel all you want to feel, right? That teaches them regulation. So timeout, right? So timeout is extremely good technique. Is not I don't believe in hitting your child and all of that. I believe in giving them timeout. And when they time out, they can cry, they can do whatever they want in the corner. And that's learning how to regulate. And if you know how to regulate, then you have a better handle of the emotions and you know how it feels like. Now the problem in our modern world is when you cry, whether you're a boy or girl, and you're told to shut up,
Wow.
you're just swallowing your emotions,
Oh.
right? And you're told to stop it, stop it, stop it.
Yeah.
So you swallow your emotions, you don't know what it feels like, then you don't know how to regulate it. When you become a grown up, it comes up as like really very strange emotions, outbursts at all the wrong times. And so, then you find that, oh, this person is really dysregulated. And why are they dysregulated in the first place? They don't know how to regulate. And I found one of the most interesting things about working with my clients is when I tell them to name the emotions, they don't know how.
Mm.
They don't know how to name the emotions. Or the emotions becomes, oh, I feel bad. Like there is no, like they cannot identify, there is no vocabulary in their mind as to what this emotion is. So I've actually, as part of my program, I created a chart with all the different emotions. And so we follow the flow, like, okay, do you feel bad? And then from feeling bad, this is what you actually feel. And then from there, let's pin it down exactly, to what is that emotion that you're actually feeling. And when we can do that, we can regulate better, for sure.
It's interesting. I love your concept of timeouts, and I think that teaches us a lot from
Yeah.
kids. I
Yeah.
was on the opposite spectrum. If I did something wrong, I got the you know what beat. I
Yeah.
got beat
Yeah.
down, like, to the point of like, that
Yeah.
cry, right? That
Yeah.
and what I realized growing up, I would be playing then, like boys do, they kind of wrestle or they play or they're really physical. If a kid did something to me, I didn't know how to react. My reaction was, I'm gonna give you as much pain as I felt.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's because, and I had to work on that process, Shamala. I had, so much anger built inside of me that I didn't even know how to carry a conversation on in
Mm.
relationships because of that piece. That took
Yeah.
a lot of training and a lot of
Mm.
therapy and a lot of coaching to get through that
Yeah.
process. And that can really hurt you if you don't
Yeah.
know, identify that. I'll never forget this. My daughter, she must have been two, maybe one and a half, two, and it was a day where she wanted to test dad, and she's 10 now, and she didn't want to wear her clothes, and she put up the stink, and she's like running around, like she's just on the bed, she's moving away from me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna be late to work. I'm like, all of this stuff is going through my head, so I was really, really upset. But I've worked on myself so much that I'm like, I need to give myself a timeout. So what I did is I removed myself because I was at the 10, and I went downstairs, and that time I was living in a condo. Went downstairs into the garage, just sat in my vehicle. I sat in there
Mm.
for 10 minutes. I knew my daughter was safe. She was in the house. She's fine. She's safe. But I needed to remove myself from that
Yeah.
situation because I had the emotional IQ that, number one, I'm a man. Number two, she's a little girl that's figuring out this process. Like, so I de-escalated myself, came back, and ever since that situation, we had a really good conversation. We planned the close the night before, all this stuff. My point to saying all that was, I had the self audit awareness that when Michael Hicks gets to a level, and if you've pushed me, I gotta go. I I,
Mm.
I give myself a time. I love what you said there, and I don't think if you don't if those of you that are listening, if you don't truly get that opportunity to change that, man, stuff like it's gonna keep snowballing. Don't you think?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And when you deliver the message of telling your kids that they're getting a timeout, don't phrase it like it's a punishment. It's not a punishment. A timeout is like space for yourself, right? To feel what you need to feel,
Mm,
and then after that, hold them, and tell them that they are in a safe space with you. And when you hold them after the timeout, they feel like, okay, it feels safe.
yeah.
And so this self hugging thing, right? It's not, um I don't think we've been taught enough. When we self hug, we are actually self regulating. So I teach my clients this as well. When you're feeling off emotionally, do this and do this.
Well,
You will calm yourself down, right? And this is self regulation. This is telling yourself that you're in a safe space, that you can hold the space, you can hold the emotions, and that it is okay to feel them. It's not a bad thing. You just
yeah.
need to know how to express it the right way, obviously. We don't want to hurt people along the way, but
When you
yeah, so
just
this.
mentioned, yeah, I love that. And for those of you that are just catching the audio, Shamala kind of gave herself a hug, a nice warm hug. But there's so much statistics behind even hugs in general.
Oh
They
yeah.
release more endorphins and dopamine, and especially if you I mean, there's statistics on if you hug your own parent or your mom for that matter, my goodness, you get so much different dopamine on that. You mentioned a
Yeah.
term which I like, and I think it's a perfect segue to this is expression, right? You had
Mm,
mentioned expression. And I think healthy expression is the difference between connection and conflict, right?
mm,
So use the terms I feel when, and then fill in the statement in your relationship. I think that's
mm.
a big piece. Do you ever find that when you're working with clients, and I had a particular situation where there's some I had well, one of my clients was going to write a letter to their parent because of so many things that they felt really hurt them. And I said, just write the letter, say how you feel, and then they brought it back. They were using a lot of words in the letter were you. I help them to really kind of use your own expression and say I feel. You is such a term that can really be defensive. What are your thoughts on
Mm.
expression in itself and what I just said?
Oh yeah, absolutely. When you say I feel, I think especially in a situation where there is conflict, then you are taking responsibility for your part. How the other person will perceive your message is not within your control, right? And
Yeah.
so you can only control how you want to respond. Now, having said that, not every conflict or situation that you have with someone where you say I feel I'm this, I'm that, right, where you take responsibility, not every situation is going to turn out well. The reason being, if the person has a narcissistic tendency, when you share how you feel, it's going to be used against you. It's
Yeah.
not going to be taken as like, oh, yeah, this is a good connection that we're having, that we are having a good conversation. It's not going to go that way. A narcissistic person will use it to their advantage, and they will bully you with it, and they will accuse you of all kinds of things, especially when you share how you feel. And so, yeah, it may not go. Sometimes we do these things because we have the hope of making the relationship better, taking responsibility. But we also have to bear in mind that sometimes it's not going to go the way that we want to. And we have to remind ourselves that we cannot control how other people respond to what ultimately is for us, right? It's for us. When we say, I feel this, I feel that. And we do the best that we can. And if the other person doesn't receive it right or receive it in the way that you feel that they should, then you just have to let that go and do your part to grow, to become healthier. Yeah.
Yeah, and I like what you said. I always say control the controllables, right? You can control how you react to any
Yeah.
type of situation. You cannot control the traffic, you cannot control the weather, you cannot control what another person says.
Yeah.
I know. I want your thoughts on this for a second. So let's say, and this has happened when I was working my 9 to 5 and in the education system, is there might have been a teacher that came at you, or an educator, or maybe just a coworker. Let's just say a coworker comes at you, and they're just kind of spewing stuff, and it's negativity. It's like you could tell they're really, really emotional. And I want to hear your thoughts on this. I came to the thought of, like, instead of allowing their negativity onto you, and some people disagree with what I'm going to say. Some people agree with what I got to say. I was taught through coaching and therapy and things of that. Are you okay today? Are you?
Mm.
My response is, are you okay? No, I'm not okay. Blah blah blah. So then, right then and there, that conversation was not meant for you right now at that particular time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like, what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's never about us, right? When people are angry and they're shouting and you just happen to be there
Yes,
and
yes.
you just happen to be in that situation, and when someone is really aggravated, and my response will always be, are you okay? And it has happened when someone was really, really angry and shouting, and not at me, but at someone else. But I was there. This was just I was walking the dog, and there was this really angry lady. And when I asked her, are you okay, she burst into tears, from
Exactly.
anger to tears,
Yeah.
because she was just feeling a lot of grief. And so sometimes people are, they're not nasty people. Sometimes they're just not in control,
Yeah.
and they've lost it for whatever reason. They're overwhelmed, and if you show some care, it gives them a space to express the real emotion. Anger is usually used to hide the real thing that is going on.
Yeah. No, that's really, really well said. There's so much that you said there that I took from. And I think of this. I think of emotional triggers versus emotional choices, right?
Yeah.
So your triggers are not your fault. However, like, your responses are your responsibility. You know
for
what I
sure.
mean? Yeah.
For
And,
sure.
like, I like to use, like, an exercise with my clients when we're talking about this. I like to say, like, write down your top three emotional triggers. Like, what really? Maybe it's someone that cuts you off in the morning when you're driving to work in the rush hour, right? Or maybe it's someone throwing trash out of a car. I don't know. I'm just giving examples, right? So, and then besides each of those, kind of like write one way to pause before you react. I always say, what do I always say? I say pause. No, it's pause, reflect. Don't be pause, react, right? Pause, reflect, take in. I've come to the point now, Shamala, is if I'm driving and if someone cuts me off, right? I used to be the dude that would get all upset about it 10 years ago, get all upset about it. Now I'm like, okay, they need to get to that place more important than where I need to go. Or maybe my creator is protecting me from something, maybe 2 seconds or whatever it might be, from something major that's going to happen. Maybe there's a big accident that's going to happen. You know what I mean? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, we live in a world where people have all kinds of stuff going on, right? And it's
Yeah.
just a mixed bag of all kinds of people with all kinds of stuff going on in their lives, and we certainly must learn how to navigate in this. It is a messy world, a lot of messy emotions, and we cannot allow ourselves to become a victim of someone else's pain or grief, or whatever that may be going on in their lives. And we need to, I always see myself, right? I mean, visualize myself as I'm walking like on a busy street or something like that. I see myself in a golden bubble, and this golden bubble keeps me safe. This golden bubble is my psychic protection, is my emotional protection. I visualize it as I'm not going to be impacted by other people's energies. I'm not going to be impacted by their pain, whatever it is that they're going through, right? And in a crowded space where, sometimes emotions run high, when, situation is not good, um, people can be really, aggravated, and you need to stay in the eye of the hurricane, right? To be calm and to not be pulled and pushed. Just be calm, get out of the situation as fast as you can, and not play into that game. I call this the game of mass consciousness. And I always remind myself and my clients, don't play the game of mass consciousness. Play your own game, not the
Yeah,
game
no,
of
I
mass
like that. And
consciousness.
you know, and here's the thing, spread as much, gosh, everybody's got a story. Everybody's
Yeah,
got something that they're dealing with that you don't know. You only
yeah,
see a emotion, or kind of going through this the you said numb earlier on the podcast, which I think is a really good way. A lot of people are. They're just like I think I talked about this on your podcast, or another, but I like to say good morning to as many people as I can, but most people cannot say good morning. They just
yeah,
they're just so numb and so like you got to be careful though too about that bubble, right? And I like your idea. However, so many people are so comfortable in their bubble, they're not willing to kind of step out. Ever since after COVID, I feel like that's just been a thing of like, okay, yeah, it's okay. You can say hello. You can say good morning. I mean, we are a society in which we need to socialize. We need to interact. We need to be around people. And yeah, and everybody just has a story. And I think of a time in which you know the work that I personally had to do to create the business that I have, to go through bad relation after bad relationship, because I had issues with myself. I had no understanding of who I was as a person. And when we can begin to realize and treat others as you want to be treated, maybe it's a better world. I don't know, like I was just driving the other day, and I was attempting to get over on the right hand side on this. You guys drive on the left. Which side for you guys are in Singapore? Are you guys right side, or do you guys drive on the left side?
a
I guess
different
that didn't
side
make
from the
sense.
US.
What's that? It's the
A
opposite of
different
the U.S.
side from the US. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I figured it was. Okay, so pick just okay. So I'm driving. I'm getting off on. So we drive on the right side. So I'm attempting to go faster, but then there's this car coming, and I I attempted to get over. Then they swerved, and then they gave me like the bird. I'm like, okay. I was just like, and for those of you that don't know the bird, that's the middle finger. Okay, it's a very universal sign that they are just saying, "Yeah, hi, you're such a nice person, so I'm just gonna give you the finger." So and you know what?
Yeah.
Back in the days, I would probably 15 years ago, Shamala, I probably would have so much anger built inside, like, how dare they do that to me? Who are they to do that to all this stuff? And I'm just like, now I took it as like, all right. I smile. I actually laugh. I like it doesn't affect me anymore. And
Yeah.
that's the thing, is like when you can truly get, as we're getting close to wrapping this up today, is if you can really get an understanding of your emotions and what, like, I felt right there. That was a prime example of mastering my emotions, because I look at where I came from to
Mm,
where I've grown to what now I teach my clients. Now I could have easily gave back to that negative energy, but what I'm telling you, if you give negative stuff back, you're gonna get it back. You know what I mean?
yeah, for sure. For sure. That's how the universe works, right? I mean, yeah. So I just want to clarify one thing for your listeners. When I talk about the bubble, right? The bubble is visualizing as a golden bubble. It allows positive energy to come in, but it
Okay.
protects you from negative energy. So the
Uh,
bubble doesn't mean that you are cut off from the rest of the world. The bubble is there as your interactive tool, which allows you to very freely interact with people, but to protect you from negativity. So that's a good psychic emotional protection that we should all do,
I like that. Yeah.
because yeah, because it helps us to have this awareness, like, okay, how much of these energies I'm going to allow into the bubble, and how much I give back in return. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
um,
And
more like
here,
a mental exercise for self-awareness. Yeah.
yeah, it's a beautiful exercise. I love it. And that's the thing too, when you're allowing all of that other emotion, I almost sometimes call it outside noise, really dictate your day. You have to be emotionally, like, checked out, exhausted, frustrated at the end of the day. And maybe you're a parent that, or maybe you're taking care of somebody when you get home, yet you have nothing left in the tank. Maybe it's your relationship, or whatever it is. But I'm just telling you, any of our listeners out there, this is like a sign to help you, manage and get through that.
Mm.
Shamala, you've got a great resume, and you've been doing this for an extensive amount of time. And we'll plug your information here in a second. But, like, what are your final words, like, today, to anyone that maybe is dealing with, we talked a little bit about narcissistic behavior in relationships, and gosh, that's a big one too. I mean, maybe we should have another podcast on that. And I know we started
Yeah.
out with that conversation, but it kind of triggered into what we were going. But what would you say to someone that maybe, you know wants to gain more emotional mastery, or higher emotional IQ? What would you say to them? Where should they begin?
Well, it begins with self awareness and how much healthier you want to be, because our emotional health is connected to physical health. And if we do not manage our emotions well, it's going to impact us physically. And all the pent up emotions, they are poisonous, they're cancerous. And if we don't deal with them emotionally, we will have to deal with them physically.
Oh,
There are no two ways about this.
yeah,
Oh,
and then, I mean, on top of that, then you're creating stress on your human body, which
yeah,
then can lead to ulcers and things that are going to
yeah,
happen internally. Yeah,
yeah,
that was really well said. And that's the thing, is, like, everybody is. It's kind of like I use the imagery of, like, a brown paper bag. Remember the sandwich bags, right? It's kind of like, every time something happens, you have, like, an emotional deregulation, or something emotionally that dictated your day. You're blowing into the bag. Eventually, that bag's gonna explode, and that's
yeah,
like your
for
mental
sure.
breakdown moment, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I do have can I plug in something that people can download?
Please, yes.
I do have a free PDF for people to download about, how to empower themselves, how to master their emotions. It's a very simple PDF. It's just a practice they can do on their own. They can download it from my website. So
That
they can
website
check out
is.
my website, shamalatan.info. Shamala is SHAMALATAN.info. Yeah.
And Shamala, how can they get a hold of you? So obviously that's your website. I want you to tell everybody. I know we met on Instagram, and you guys. I'm just gonna tell you right now. Well, I mean, I met through Alina, but I mean, what an amazing individual Shamala is, and the criteria and the information that she puts out on her podcast and her reels. is really, really good stuff. And I would highly suggest all of you to go follow her today. But Shamala, give us your Instagram handle and how they can get a hold of you.
Yeah. For Instagram, you can look for me at Shamala Tan. Is SHAMALATAN. That's my handle. And there, we have all the reels, all the information. You can use the link there to download the free resource as well to help yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, well, Shamala, it's been a blessing from Singapore. We appreciate you so much. I'm so glad that you and I have connected again, and let's keep doing this. Let's get on. I'll
Yeah.
come over by you guys next time, and maybe I'll bring
Yes,
you and Alina
please
on.
do.
I won't talk so much. I think last time it was Elena that kind of was talking because I think we were talking about the earthquake situation, right? Like she had a big,
Yes,
yeah.
yes,
You
the
remember that?
earthquake. I
Yeah,
mean, that was huge. So that needed to be,
yeah, yeah.
she needed to talk.
Yeah, she did.
Yeah, it was
Yeah, for
huge.
those of you that you want to hear that story, it's in my archives. It's Alina surviving a earthquake. I don't know what episode that is, but go ahead and check that out. All right,
Yeah.
Shamala, any final words before we go?
No, just stay safe, everyone, and be in touch with your feelings and emotions. Don't push them down.
I love that. Well
Yeah.
said. And you heard it all here on Framing New Heights. If you like the podcast, please make sure to send it to 5 other your friends and give us a 5-star rating, or just tell us really what you like and what you want to hear. You can also email me. You guys have that information in my bio. But as always, 1% better in mind, body, and soul. Come on, Shamala, stay flexed. Show those muscles. Let's go. All right. Thank you, Shamala. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye. Thank you.